Being a small spot in a huge ocean, it's very attractive for seabirds. We estimate the population in the breeding season to be roughly 1 million breeding pairs. And then you can add the non-breeding part of the population, which gives roughly 1 million more birds. Now we are situated on the southern tip of Bjørnøya in a valley called Revdalen, which is the base for our field camp. My name is Halvard Strøm, and I've been working with seabirds in the Arctic for 35 years, mostly here in Svalbard, but also in the Russian Arctic. Bjørnøya is situated in the middle of the Barents Sea, midway between the mainland Norway and Spitsbergen. The breeding populations on Bjørnøya are huge. It's a global important breeding site for seabirds. The island is situated in the central part of the Barents Sea, where cold Arctic water meets warmer Atlantic water. This zone, called the polar front, is very productive. That's the reason why we have these huge seabird populations on the island. Seabirds are important to monitor because they are an important part of the marine ecosystem in the Arctic. They are important for the transport of nutrients from sea to land. They breed on land, but they find all their food at sea, and they bring nutrients back to the terrestrial system that geese, reindeer, waders, the polar fox are dependent on. So they are an important vector in the system. Secondly, they are culturally important. They are important for many small settlements around the coast, both as products that they produce, food, feathers and so on, but also in language and many other ways. Here on Bjørnøya, we have a seabird monitoring program that has been running for 40 years now. We are focusing on 8 key species. It's both the murre species, the kittiwake, the fulmar, the northern gannet, the great skua and the little auk. We are looking into survival, production, phenology. We are looking into migration routes and wintering areas, and also ecotoxicology or contaminants. Right now we are a team of 4 working here in Revdalen, and we have a team in the northwest corner of the island working on great skuas.
My name is Elin Sjöholm. I'm from Sweden. I'm a marine biologist, and I've been working with seabirds for about 5 years now, and this is my second season here on Bjørnøya. What I enjoy with working with seabirds is that you get to come really close to these animals that you usually only see from afar. Most of their time they're out at the ocean, quite unreachable. But for this short period of time you really get to get close, see what they're doing and observe them. And we get to sort of unveil the mysteries of where they're actually going when they're not breeding by collecting data and monitoring their success.
Bjørnøya is unique due to the fact that it's a meeting place for Arctic species who have their southernmost breeding site here on Bjørnøya, and we have more southern species that have their northern limit here on the island. So you can say it's a meeting point between Arctic and more southern species. That's why it's also very interesting as a monitoring site, because here we expect that changes will come, as for instance climate change. We started off here in 1986, mainly doing counts, looking into population changes. In 2004, the National Seabird Monitoring Program in Norway expanded into something called CPOP. Then we also expanded the work here on Bjørnøya to more species and to look more into monitoring parameters that tells us something about why things are happening, and also to forecast what might happen in the future. I think all the work we are doing here on Bjørnøya is kind of feeding into the Arctic Council work. We report the population data to the Circumpolar Biodiversity Monitoring Program. We report into AMAP the work we do on contaminants. I think it's essential with circumpolar collaboration because we have shared populations, and many of the seabird species in the Arctic are circumpolar. They breed all around. It highlights problems that we don't see on a national level, but we see on the international level, and help countries to implement actions that probably would not happen if we didn't have the circumpolar collaboration. So to collaborate and get a better understanding what is the real situation for many of these species are very valuable. And again, to coordinate the work we do, to have standardized protocols, working together to get as good knowledge base as possible. I think that's a very important part of the circumpolar work. Today we will catch birds to deploy GPS loggers. We are on the southern tip of Bjørnøya. We will now try to catch a thick-billed murre. The birds are now incubating, and we try to avoid catching birds that are incubating. So we try now to see if we can see mates to those that are incubating. We will then lift them up with a long stick. So now we are removing a GPS logger that we deployed on this bird last year. And hopefully it will tell us where the bird has migrated and stayed during winter. Winter conditions are important for how many birds that will show up here on Bjørnøya. So it tells us a lot about their winter ecology. We are now putting on a light logger or GLS logger. That doesn't have the same accuracy as the GPS logger, but it tells us with some uncertainty where the bird will stay during summer, winter, fall and spring. I would expect that it has had the winter north of Iceland or on the southwest coast of Greenland. It has two rings. The metal ring is a unique ring that will stay on for the whole life of the bird. It tells us where it was ringed and when it was ringed. The plastic ring is a unique code that we can read at a distance. And we also use the plastic ring for attaching different sort of instruments like this light logger or time depth loggers or different other types. I will weigh the bird, see if it has put on weight during winter or lost weight. Ah, pretty heavy. 1120. Then I would guess that she has put on weight during winter, which is great. Now I'm picking feathers for measuring stable isotopes, which tell us something about the bird's diet during winter. And we know from our database that this female was breeding last year. But so far this year she haven't laid any egg. But that may still happen. This is the first day we have seen the bird here on Bjørnøya. The thick-billed murre is a strong bird. Yes, you are. Yeah, so they feed on small fish and crustaceans. Here on Bjørnøya, the diet is dominated by capelin during summer. And it's a very robust and strong bird. It has impressed me many times. It's very well adapted to this harsh Arctic environment, I would say. Fantastic, cool bird. Yeah, the temperament He's, I would say, maybe a little bit aggressive. He knows to protect himself, at least compared with the common guillemot. Okay, I think we should let him go.
So now I can look up the birds in the database to get some more information about them. So this thick-billed murre that we just caught, we can see that it was first ringed in 2016. So it's at least 10 years old now. And we can also see at which nest it was breeding last year. And in this case we can see that this is actually the mate of the oldest thick-billed murre that we have observed here. And we can also see when she was last observed, 318 days ago, and what kind of logger she has on right now. And she had a GPS that we put on in July last year.
To track seabirds today we have mainly 3 tools. It's the light logger or the GLS logger. It's a very good tool for large-scale tracking. In addition to that, we have the GPS logger that we can deploy for shorter periods of time. Thirdly, we have the satellite transmitter or Argos transmitter, which communicates via satellite. It's kind of a huge step forward in seabird ecology. Seabirds use enormous ocean areas. Just the birds here on Bjørnøya, they are using more or less the whole of North Atlantic during 1 year. And even we have birds or species going down to South Africa. So the area use is really impressive, but also important because it tells us that they will face stressors along migration routes and in wintering areas that we didn't know about. So we have now been collecting eggs from British guillemot for long-term monitoring of contaminants and pesticides. As we are early in the season, the birds will now relay a new egg. We are especially looking at PCBs or DDE, which is a pesticide. Those substances had very high levels here on Bjørnøya in the 70s and 80s. And many of them are from industrial production in Europe and America. And it's transported here to Bjørnøya by long-range transport and ends up here in the food chain and finally in the seabirds. The British guillemot is feeding in the upper part of the food chain and thus accumulating contaminants that accumulate in the food chain, and is thus an important and good indicator for the ecosystem health. The monitoring here on Bjørnøya started in 2003, and what is positive is that many of the trends are showing decrease in the level of contaminants here on the island, thanks to long-term monitoring due to international collaboration, and I think the work during the Stockholm Convention has been important for this. Seabirds are an important part of our natural heritage, so I think it's important to try to protect them. They are important parts of the marine ecosystem. So we need to know what's going on in these populations. At the same time, they are long-lived, so long-term monitoring is really essential, and try to understand why some populations are increasing, some are declining, and also understand the threats, and also to be able to come up with good management suggestions for how to best protect seabirds in the future. Seabirds are in trouble. Out of roughly 11,000 bird species on the planet, seabirds are the most threatened group. Arctic seabirds constitute a group of roughly 60 species. Generally, we can say that many of the species and populations shows worrying declines, especially in the North Atlantic.
The Arctic is changing, it's warming. Their preferred habitat is becoming less available and smaller, so they are shrinking, many of them in population sizes. So I am concerned that if this trend continues, that many of them will continue to decline and possibly cease to exist.
A number of factors is contributing to the declining seabird populations in the Arctic. Climate change is one important driver. Disruption of food chains. We have bycatch, competition with fisheries, oiling, contaminants, and we have new diseases coming, like the bird flu, which has hit several populations quite hard. You have direct effects of climate change on seabirds. That might be heat stress, which we can see for some species here on Bjørnøya. And then you have the more indirect effects, which usually goes through the food base. So the prey species that the seabirds are dependent on are moving northwards, or at least moving out of the reach of the seabirds. And here in the breeding season on Bjørnøya, the birds here are dependent on having food in areas that are reachable and at a predictable time. And climate change this distribution of prey species, which cause troubles for many seabird species. Then the production of chicks will go down, and also the survival of the adult birds, and the populations will be declining. The birds can to some degree move to other areas, but the problem is that these changes happen so fast that seabirds have problems adapting to the changes. I think the most important thing going on right now is that Arctic species are on retreat. They are kind of forced northwards. So we see that little auk, thick-billed murre, the glaucous gull, they are declining here on the island, while the more southern species like great skua, common guillemot, gannet, they are increasing in numbers and kind of taking over. So there is a community shift going on. I think that's maybe the most important change over these 40 years that we have been working here. And this is a typical example. We saw this glaucous gull kill a kittiwake on the snow here half an hour ago. Then the great skua came and took over the prey, and the glaucous went away. The great skua is a new species in Svalbard, or relatively new. The first breeding record was here on Bjørnøya in 1971, and since then the population has increased, and the great skua is now all over Svalbard and all over the Barents Sea. And it's a dominant species, so the glaucous gull have got a new competitor, and it always gives up the prey if the great skua shows up. It seems like the glaucous gull is suffering this new competitor. Yeah, very often has to give away its prey. He's on his way back to see what's left. Since we started the studies here on Bjørnøya 40 years ago, the weather and the climate has changed quite a bit. First and foremost, it has become warmer, both during summer and winter. The permafrost is thawing, and the effect of that is that ponds dry out or becomes drained. An example here on the southern tip of the island, where we had a huge pond before, now it's just a small part left. In addition to that, we have got much more rain than what we had previous. When we worked here in the 80s and the 90s, we had fog. Bjørnøya is well known for its fog, but we didn't have heavy rain. So that's also a new thing. And it seems like some of the Arctic seabirds, they are not really adapted to heavy rain. They can stand cold, really cold conditions, but wet and cold, that's a problem, especially for the chicks in the nest. Extreme weather events increase the mortality. More seabirds die. So first and foremost, it influences the survival of the adult birds. This winter we had a mass death of thick-billed moors in Svalbard. Thousands of birds died during January, February. I'm very curious to see if we will measure any effects here on the ledges on Bjørnøya. It seems like there are fewer birds this summer than last summer, but still a bit too early to say.
In the future, I'm quite worried that these Arctic systems will have changed drastically and won't be available for us to visit or observe the way that we do now, that the changing climate will lead to the loss of these ecosystems and these habitats. I personally care for seabirds, not only because I really like birds, I enjoy bird watching, I enjoy working with seabirds, but also because I really want these populations to be thriving, and they're good indicators of how the Arctic environment and the ocean is doing generally. So a happy seabird population could mean a happy environment.
What concerns me most when it comes to Arctic seabirds is the fact that they are under a number of pressures, and these pressures, they are increasing in numbers. So I think that the cumulative effect of all these factors is what worries me most. I think my main concern is if we are able to protect the migration route and the wintering areas, as they are far from Bjørnøya in many cases. So we need to take a flyway approach to conserve seabirds and try to see the whole year, not only while they are here on Bjørnøya. We can collect data or put together data from all the countries. We can look at trends. We can look into what we think are the most important drivers. We can agree on knowledge gaps, where should we put effort in for the next few years. It has great value in kind of bringing people together and put focus on the threats for Arctic seabirds. Seabirds are good storytellers for the Arctic. They breed all over the Arctic, in all the regions. I've been interested in birds since I was a small kid. I think seabirds are very fascinating organisms. They are very well adapted to their environment. They look a bit clumsy on land, but at sea they are just amazing, and they can dive to several hundred meters and they can stay the whole winter up here, which is amazing, taking the harsh environment into consideration. As seabirds are on the top of the food chain, they will respond to changes further down in the food chain, and they react quite quickly. So they are good indicators on what's going on in the marine system, and we can monitor them over kind of long-term programs, which is important to really understand how things are working and try to understand the mechanisms. So seabirds are good indicators for a number of reasons.
I think people should care for the fate of seabirds because it's not only about the seabirds, but it's also about the bigger picture. Because when we look at these seabirds and the data on how the populations are doing and what is happening dynamically, then we also have to ask ourselves the question, why are we seeing what we are seeing? And that gives us sort of clues into what is happening large scale in our environment and with all of the different species and climate that is going on.
Most of the seabirds, they are in the Arctic maybe 2-3 months a year. Rest of the year they move to other areas, living on the free ocean. Seabirds are moving across borders. They don't care about national borders. It's important that countries are working together to protect and conserve seabirds. One nation can't do that alone. As an example, Norwegian seabirds that migrate out of Norwegian waters during fall and winter. They may visit as many as 10-15 countries. So they are really connecting countries, and countries need to talk together to be able to protect and conserve seabirds. Although many species or populations are declining, there are still some positive stories, like the common guillemot here on Bjørnøya. It collapsed the first year we started here on Bjørnøya, the winter 1986-1987. We lost maybe half of the population due to lack of food and a very hard winter. We have seen in the years after that the common guillemot population have been able to re-establish and are now back on the level before the monitoring, or when we started here in 1986. So although some things are going in the wrong direction, there is also hope that things are improving.
What motivates me to keep doing this work is to contribute to this very long data series that we have, because without this data we wouldn't know how the climate is changing and how populations are changing due to different factors. So having this data really is what enables us to study this change and possibly prevent it from getting worse.
I think we are privileged being allowed to work with seabirds the way we do. Going here, doing studies, having these numbers and all the species available, and be able to go back every year and to kind of follow them. It's very motivating to see that the data and the knowledge we are gaining is of use for the society. So people are asking for what we deliver. Like in Arctic Council, we are contributing with data and knowledge. So I think both the fascination and the interest of finding out new things, and that you see that the knowledge is used and there is a need for it, is a very important motivator.
I would like policymakers to know that what we do matters, what we do now matters, and we have to act quite fast.
I hope decision makers realize that seabirds are important. They matter. They are an important part of the marine ecosystem. We are dependent on a functioning ecosystem. We take out huge resources out of the marine system. And even though you can be impressed by the numbers of seabirds, the numbers are not infinite. Like in 1986, when we lost more than half of the common guillemot population here. We couldn't really believe it when we came back and saw that the ledges were empty. But that might happen, and we see on the Norwegian mainland that colonies go extinct. Many colonies of, for instance, kittiwakes are gone. So we need to take care of seabirds, and we need to take action. It will not last forever.